This conference will now be recorded.
So, hello everyone, welcome to today's session. I'm your instructor for the day, Cyril. Just give me a vocal confirmation when you are able to view my screen and also if I'm audible enough. Okay, so I'm just sharing my screen. So, is my audio and video clear?
Yep.
Okay, thanks for the confirmation. So, as we have a gap of 2 days, right? Just wanted to brush you up on what we have discussed so far, as we are just getting started with the JavaScript fundamentals, right? So if you just remember on a very high note, I had described JavaScript as a scripting language, which is basically used to create web content, right? So all your uh, web pages are actually built on .js files, right? Or your browser pages. So on the client side, JavaScript runs on the browser, and on the server side that we saw, that is on development side, it runs on Node.js, right? So we use Node.js in our IDE also, that is in our VS Code to run JavaScript files, right? And first of all, we saw a simple program of how we can write any output on the console using the console.log statement, right? And then we went on to the concept of variables, right? Defining a variable. So we took some examples in VS Code, and I have just taken some very similar examples just to showcase you, right? For example, if you want to define someone name, and that name can be of type string, right? So we can define it using let keyword. We can say let name is equals to double quotes John. And if you want to define something, but that variable needs to be a constant variable, meaning that no one should able to reassign that value of that variable, right? For example, age of a person for 1 full year can remain constant, right? Which is 30 years, right? So in that case also const age equals to 30 would make more sense, right? And so moving on to different data types that we saw yesterday. So if you just look at the presentation, that is the presentation visible to you? Are you seeing the data types presentations?
Yep.
Okay, that's great. So you will find that we can define any data type just by assigning the appropriate type of value to it, right? So when I say name equals to Alice in double quotes, right, that indicates that name is a variable of data type string, right? And if I provide any number, it is understood as number. And if I define a data type with value of either true or false, it is assumed that it is of type boolean, right? Then we have null types, undefined types, right? And we also saw an example where I can create an object out of a variable, right? So when I say a person, right, and I want to define two properties against that person, right? This is of type object that you see at the last one that you see, right, which is of let keyword. So this is of good importance, right? So this is of type object that we created. So we created a type called name, right? We created a variable called person, right? And when I say person in particular, person will have more than one property, right? Name can have a single attribute saying that name is Alice or name is John or name is Rahul, something like that, right? But when I talk about a person, I know that I need to define person with more than one attribute or more than one property, right? So name can be Bob, right? And also he can also have an age, some particular age, right? This is just an example. If you want to define your own person, right, you can add more properties to it. You can also mention whether he has a job profile, whether he is available for work, right? Or you can also add a flag whether he is a minor or is an adult, something like that, right? So you can play around with it. So the basic concept is you can also create objects when you are defining a variable. Just as an example of person. Okay, so anything that you see between the braces that starts with this kind of syntax, right, that denotes that this is of type object, right? So you have to be closely be attentive on this braces that you see. Okay. So this was all the revision that we had yesterday. Okay. And today's session will continue with the remaining topics, right? One more thing I wanted to just quickly highlight you on is we also saw an example of concatenation and interpolation, if you guys remember, right? If I have it on presentation, let me just quickly show it to you. Okay, so this is an example of concatenation that we saw yesterday, right? So we can combine two strings. So for example, you have the first string, right, which is first name as variable, then you have uh, last name as another variable. Now if you want to concatenate, that means add these two strings, right? So what you can say is like full name is equals to first name, right? And there is an empty space provided over here. Consider there is a space provided over here and then provided with the last name, right? So what will be the output when you do a console.log output of this particular variable? You would find that full name will now have first name John, then the space that is provided, then the last name as 2. Okay, so using this kind of syntax, you can concatenate two strings. Okay. And the another interesting way of doing the same is using the interpolation method, which in the JavaScript world or TypeScript world also it is used widely because the syntaxing is very similar or very easier to follow, right? So for example, you have a variable say name and you have another variable say greetings, right? And the use case is like you just have to call hello and the name of the person, right? So hello Alice, right? And how do you do that? If you want to pass this as a variable component, you use a dollar symbol that is available to you, and inside the curly braces you pass the variable as a parameter, right? So tomorrow if you want to change the name over here to some other name, right, say Rahul or something, right? So just changing over here will be enough to add that variable over here, right? So in that case, when you do a console.log output of this particular variable called greeting, you will get hello comma space Rahul, right? So how do we start that? You see this kind of symbol at the beginning that is available just above your tab button in the keyboard. So in the keyboard that you see, you have something called tilde, right? So just use that same keyword over here. Okay, so this is not single quotes, but the value that you see just above your tab keyword in your keyboard. Let me know if you are not aware of the same. Okay, because we might be using this kind of interpolation just to show you the quick output of what variables that we have defined, right? Okay, so moving on to the examples that we had discussed yesterday, right from lesson 1, right? Hope you guys have no issues following the lecture that was mentioned on the last day. We had a quick revision for the same. If you have any questions related to the same, do let me know, right? Example of concatenation. So this kind of examples is what we also saw yesterday, right? That is creation of objects, right? Just like let, we can also use var, right? And with that we can define an object over here. So if I see what is customer object, it has several properties, right? First name, last name, age, a boolean whether to showcase whether that customer is active or not, and the list of cars that the customer owns, right? That is of type array, right? When I say array, you can see that example of array over here. So when I say a variable defined of name companies is equals to, and starting with square brackets, I am providing the values all in double quotes, right? So colleague, can you tell me what kind of array is this companies? right? So this array is of type string, right? So if I just mouse over it, you will be able to understand that variable companies is of type of string, and it is an array of string. Okay, how do you define an array? You see the square brackets that are showing just besides their data type, that denotes that this is an array of string, right? So similarly, can you tell me how can I create an array of numbers? Biswajit, Vidya, just give it a try so that just to know if you're able to follow along, right? Like we created an array of string. Can you tell me how I can create an array of numbers over here? Just give it a try, even though if you're going wrong, I'm there
I
to
think I think
help
you can
you.
go var number equals and then the number decor directly.
Yeah, where numbers equal to then yeah,
One, two,
bracket,
three,
square bracket, 1
square
comma 2
bracket.
comma 3 per 5, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So once you do that, right, you can also cross check whether what kind of array is getting created, right? So if you mouse over on this variable now defined as numbers, right, using it as plural, and you will find that it is of type number and it is of array of type number, right? Okay, great. So moving on to another topic now, we talked about objects and arrays, right? And so we also can define some relations between the same, right? Using operators and all those things, right? So let's talk about the same. And also as a practice, you create the same examples or a similar example that I have been creating so far, and also get used to on how you can run the same, right? So for today's example, let me just delete this lessons folder that we have created last time, and let me now create a new file, say lesson 4 for today, right? And the topic of discussion for lesson 4 would be relational or comparison operators. Right, so what do you mean by relational or comparison operators, right? So if you have two variables and you need to make some comparisons out of it, right? So just a very basic example, by definition we already know that 1 is a number smaller than 2, right? Or 10 is a number which is smaller than 20, right? So we are similar to that, we have different mathematical operators that we are already aware of, right? So this defines more than, like this kind of symbol that you see, and this symbol will be notation of less than, right? And if you want to define something which is more than or equal to a number, say if you want to have a hard check, right? So just by saying that age more than or equals to 18, right, can be treated as an individual who is an adult. Right. So to make such kind of statements, you can make use of this kind of symbols that are available to you. Right. So this would define the as more than or equals to. Similarly, you go with the opposite approach and we can just define it this as less than or equal to. Okay. So just to give an example, if I start creating a variable of type result, right? And so if I say variable result is now something which is defined by this kind of syntax, right? So what we basically saw is like variable result is equals to 10 greater than 5, right? Now if you just mouse over to result, you see that result is of type boolean now, right? I haven't defined that result should be of type boolean, right? But this kind of operator check checks whether this statement is true or false, right? And that is assigned to a variable of type boolean, right? Now if I just do a simple console.log output and I pass my variable what is result over here. So what is that output that you guys are expecting to happen if I run this file lesson4.js?
Is it true?
False.
Yeah, so 10 is greater than 5. It is a statement that is a right statement, correct? And how do I run this file? If you guys remember from our previous lecture, if I want to run lesson4.js, if you could recall how we could run this file.
A node and the file name.
Yeah, that's right. Because we just discussed that we on the server side, or sorry, on the client side, we are making use of Node.js to run our scripts, right? So that's why we always have to make use of Node and then provided by the file name. Okay, so the statement returns as true because if you see 10 is a number which is actually greater than 5, right? If I say 10 is a number which is less than 5, okay, less than symbol, okay? So in this case, what would happen? We are expecting the opposite to take place, right? So just by making this kind of checks, we are able to validate whether our operation or our expression is returning true or false, right? So this kind of statements are widely used to check your programs, right? Whether they are returning true or false with some conditional checks, right? You can also try out different examples using more than or equals to, right? So very one example would be like when I say a number 7 is greater than 7. Okay, so is number 7 greater than 7? What would happen in this case? No, right? 7 is not greater than 7, right? So in this case, what would make sense if 7 is equals to 7, right? So you can also make more than or equal to statements over here when you have to check that either it should be greater than the other variable or it should be equals to other variable, right? So here the or operator will be used where it will check whether a number is not only greater or it is equals to 7, right? If I now change this to in this way, you see my result is returned as true.
So it is considering it as boolean with the result or the values which are given after equal to Cyril.
Yeah, so this expression is getting evaluated, right?
Okay.
And the result of this expression is of type boolean. And whether that value is true or false is now set in the variable as true, right? So even we have not defined that whether this result is of type boolean or not. You will never find it anywhere that I have hard coded it saying that it is of type boolean. JavaScript understands that it is boolean because after the equal to operation, we are providing an expression which checks whether that statement is true or not, right? So right now it will be just of type boolean, whether but that value whether it is true or not will be only set when this expression is returning true or not or false or not.
Okay.
So similarly you can also check less than or equals to also. So if I just change this to less than or equal to statement itself, the same result we are expecting. So what would happen here is here the expression will check whether 7 is less than 7. Okay, so 7 is less than 7 is a false statement, right? But we have also mentioned less than or equals to, right? So it will also check for 7 is equals to 7, right? So the other part of expression returns true. So either this or this, right? If any of the checks are getting returned, So in our case, 7 is equals to 7 and it is returning as false, right? So if I make it as some bigger number, now this statement changes, right? So 7 is less than 17 is a false statement, and 7 is now not equal to 17. So that is also a false statement, right? So the result will also be false. Okay, so 7 being less than 7 or 7 being equals to 7. Okay, that is strange. Okay, so what is going wrong over here, guys? If you're able to see.
7 is less than 17, so it's fine.
Yeah, that's right. So I should have changed it in this way.
Yeah.
Okay. So similarly, now if I want to check whether an operation is equals to another operation, right? So if I want to compare whether an variable is actually equals to some other variable, right? Or any other value, right? We can use the equals operator that we have, right? So if I make a vague statement saying that variable x is equals to 1, right? And now just to have a check, right? So if I will do a console.log output, and if I say that whether this variable x is now equals to the value that is mentioned as 1, right? So let me go back and just comment this console statement so that we only see this as value, right? And let me do one more thing over here. Okay, so when I say console.log, okay, and let me just add one over here. Okay, so we are checking, we assign the value of 1 to the variable called x. Okay, and now we are checking whether that x is equals to 1. Okay, so if I just do a log output, okay, of the same, so what will be the return type of this expression? So what is that you guys would be expecting to happen in this case? Right, this statement is returned
Should
as
be
true.
true.
Yeah, that's right. So if I do one more check, okay, so instead of double equals to, now I say that x is triple equals 1. Okay, so what would be the output of the second statement that we are seeing? Line number 19. Now we are saying that x is also equals to 1. So in this case, can we expect it as true? Any answers here? Any guesses? What is expected
False,
here?
probably.
Okay, now coming to reasoning for the same. Why? What is that happened that you said probably false? Okay, the answer was correct, but also I need to know why did you think that it would return as false?
So, not equal to
It is equals to, right? So we defined variable
three
x to be
times.
equals to 1. Uh-huh.
When we
3
give
times
3 times
Probably it's
equals to
Three
comparing
equals to
two
this.
data types, probably, if they are identical or not.
Yeah. So when I say double equals to, right? So this kind of comparison is also known as loose comparison. Okay. So it just check what the value is stored over here. So what it checks over here is that x is now having a value of 1, right? And the statement is right, x is having the value of 1, right? But what happens in the second case, right? Not only does it check what is the value, but it also check what type of value stored in this example, right? So this kind of comparison is actually strict comparison. Okay, so not only the value but the data type is also checked, right? So in my like in our previous session and also today's session when we were revising, I just told you like anything that you mention in double quotes or single quotes is compared as a string, right? So on the value basis, yes, 1 is equals to 1, But if you check variable x, right, if you just mouse over on variable x, you would come to know that variable x is of type number, right? So type of number is now also compared whether it is equals to a type of string, and that case becomes false, right? So if I want to make this as a true statement, what change should I be doing over here in line number 90?
Remove the single quotes.
Yeah, that's right. So now if I just remove the single quotes, and you will now know that one is of type number now, and now in this case the strict comparison will be able to pass. So it also happens in the programming world that when we are using loose comparator, the data type mismatch comes into play, right? And that can also create some level of ambiguity. Not always required to move on the same approach based on how what kind of situations are getting handled, right? You may have to choose between loose comparison or strict comparisons when making compare statements. Okay, so I hope this example is very clear to you with respect to double equals to and triple equals to, and what is the difference between the same. So
So the
do
first
try
one
some.
answer is sorry. The first one
Yeah,
answer is true, right? The console.log that loose comparison.
yeah, loose comparison will be true. So why it will be true?
Well, it's checking just the not the type, but just the string character. It's not
Yeah, so just the
verifying.
value of what is getting stored in the variable x, correct? So you're right, it will return as true. So now let us move to logical operators. So we saw that we can use operations such as greater than or equals to, right? So this is read as greater than or equals to, right? So what if there are statements where you have to check more than one statement is true or not, right? So let me just create a new file and just take an example over here. Like we have to check whether two expressions are returning true or not, right? For example, if both the expressions are returning true, then only we'll be checking whether it is returned true or not. So we can go with logical and logical or, right? Right. So if I just make a console.log statement over here, right, and I just pass to boolean, right, say this is a true statement, right, and to use and operator you have to make use of this ampersand symbol that you see, and adding that two times, right? So mentioning ampersand two times, right? So if I say that this statement is also true and this statement is also true, so what will be the overall output of this console.log output?
It's not clear.
What?
True. The question is not
Yeah,
clear.
that's right. So the question was right. See, what happens in this case is like we are checking both the expression to return as true, right? Because we are making use of and operator. Now you're getting my, you're understanding the statement. So let me bring it in another way. Okay, let me just change the value to false. Okay. So what would happen in this case? So basically what we are trying to do is just imagine you have an expression over here that returns as true. We have added an and operator in between the same, right? And we're adding another expression which is returning a boolean, say false, right? And what does this and operator do? Basically it needs to check whether both the statements what it is exactly returning, right? So what would happen in the second case over here,
False.
False.
right? Because if you see, if only both the statements are returning true, then that expression will be returned as true. So that is how you can use AND operator. Okay. So if I just copy this part again, okay, same example but a different expression, right? So if I make use of logical OR, right? So how do I say use the same expression using this OR operator?
Pipe symbol.
Yeah. And where can you find the pipe symbol? If you see just before your enter button, you have a pipe symbol, and just like ampersand operator, you need to make use of pipe operator, mentioning it as twice. Okay. So what would happen in this case now? Okay. Now we just change our operator from AND to OR, right? So what would be that output that we are expecting to takes place right now? So let me just change this both to false now. Okay. Now both of them are false. Okay, so what will be that output of this statement?
True. False.
Right?
Or if any one of them is false, then return false, right?
Yeah, that's right. So we are using OR operator, right? So now let me just change this to this. Okay, so what is that you might be expecting to happen in this
True.
case? That's right.
True.
So I hope that example is now clear when you have to use AND or when you have to use OR. So basic idea is like if both the statements are returning the same value, then that value will be checked, right? So if I say, just to put it in a mathematical format, so if I say 7 is a number, right? So just to get a true statement, so 7 is a number which is greater than 7 is a number which is also greater than 6, right? So this expression would return what, right? So I say 7 is a number which is greater than 5 and 7 is a number which is also greater than 6, right? So I believe both these statements are returning true, right? Because both these statements are factually correct, right? But if I make a statement say 7 is a number which is also greater than 15, right? So what would be that output of this expression?
False.
Yeah, that's right. When we are using AND as operator, okay? And if you are using OR as operator, what would
True.
happen? True, right? Because either of that expression will be checked. And if either of that expression is returning as true, then true will be returned. Okay. So let me just remove this part, right? So you would find that what can be use case of this such statements, right? So if you remember, I told you like I can check whether an individual is adult or not, right? So how do I check whether an individual is adult? So different countries will have different format of checking whether an individual is adult or not, right? So one check that we see is like on the basis of his age, correct? So if age is greater than or equals to 18, we can say he is an adult or not, right? So if I just have a small program to provide license to users, right? And so this license is basically a driver's license, right? So if you see all the driver's license, we have a age barrier check. So let me just create a variable, say whether age is valid, right? And I will assign a boolean to it for now. Okay, so if age is valid, and also I would say whether that individual is citizen or not, right? So we'll also check whether that individual is citizen to that country or not. Right? And I can make another statement that whether he is eligible. Okay, so what is our eligibility criteria? We want to check whether his age is valid, correct, and also he is a citizen or not, right? So he is eligible. How we can check? We can basically say whether age is valid, right, and also he should be a citizen of that country. Right? So in this case only, what I would do a console.log output. Okay. I will make use of interpolation statement now. Okay, so this is the interpolation statement. Okay, and I will say user is eligible for driving license, right? And then I can provide the value or the output that can be expected, right? So in this case is eligible, right? User is eligible for driving license, whether yes or no, we can get it from this statement, right? So just the same thing, if you see same example, right? But in a more fashioned or from a use case perspective I've written, right? So what is that you are expecting to happen? Let me just remove this console.log output as well, so that we see only the output in line number 60. So what would happen in this case now? Whether can we define whether is eligible for getting a driving license,
True.
right? So the statement would return user is eligible. Yes, he is eligible. And now if any of one particular check fails, right? So even though he is a citizen, sorry, he is of valid age, right? Whatever that age might be, depending on what country, but he is not a citizen of that country. So in that case, the eligibility check should fail, and that's what happens, right? So this kind of logical checks we can use in our programs to uh, check whether anyone is eligible or not by making such statements, right? And in this particular statement, if I replace it with or, right, then the purpose is now not fulfilled, right? So what would happen in this case? So either if is valid, which is returning as true, or is false, right? So either of one condition should be returning as true, and the eligibility check would be getting passed, right? So that's why you have to be very careful in terms of use case, whether to use an and or an or operator based on what you're trying to accumulate. Okay, so if you see in this case, it is returning as true because one of that expression is actually returning as true, so that overall expression is returned as true, right? Because our goal is also same, right? We are checking whether either he should be of valid age or he should be a citizen. If any of the one condition is getting satisfied, then we can return whether he is eligible or not, right? And if both the conditions are not satisfied, even in an or operator, you will find the result as false. Okay, so this is very much similar to how you would interpolate it when you're speaking in a very plain English language, right? Using the and or operators. Okay, so
Cyril,
yes.
one like here we are giving the type as Boolean. So why are we defining it as a Boolean as age is valid equal to false?
Yeah, so the type is Boolean, but what is the type of that value? So Boolean can be either true or either false.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's why we are also providing what should be the value of that Boolean. Okay, so think it in this way also. Like if I say, if I put a variable over here saying that the variable should be greater than or equals to 18, then that expression will be evaluated and you get that return type value as the Boolean value, right? Whether it can be false or true, right? So if you go back to this example, okay, what is happening in this example, variable result is of type Boolean, okay, but what is that value of that Boolean is actually defined by what expression is returned over here on the right hand side, what that expression is written, right? So instead of doing that, you can also directly assign and value to a Boolean.
Okay.
Even that works. Yeah. So we can also have logical not operators. So basically we saw equals to operator over here. If you remember in lesson number 4, we use this kind of syntax to check whether a variable is equals to another variable or not. Okay, so what is the same thing if I want to do, but in an opposite way, to check whether that variable should not be equals to this, right? So what can I do is I can use a logical not operator, right? So what I can basically do is just to show you the output. If I want to make a statement, say 1 is equals to 1. Okay, so let me just comment this out so that we see only this as output. Okay, so what would happen in this case? It would return as true, right? So if I just change this to some another value, okay, this would also return as false. Okay, what if I want to do a negation check, right? I know already that 10 is not equals to 1, right? And if I want to have a negation check, right, you already know the equal to operator. Just a small change that you have to do is you have to add an exclamatory symbol right before that, right? And now the statement will be reversed. Okay, so what we are checking that 10 is should not be equals to 1, right? So double equals to is to check whether that statement is equals to the other statement, right? Another way of negating the same would be using an exclamatory mark, right? So any equals to operation that you see can be negated using the exclamatory mark.
So instead of declaring the variables directly, we can put that validation in the console.
Yeah,
Console.
because see, because we are just having a factual check, right?
Hmm.
That's why, right? Because the maths operator that you see over here, like the checking whether a number is greater than another number, that you can do directly inside the console.log statement itself. Okay, because that this particular expression will be evaluated, right? But if you have some conditional checks, for example, if you are checking whether that citizen is citizen or not, right, and that is based on some logic, like you would have some level of another checks, and ultimately that result, if you want to check the output of the expression, then providing directly will not suffice over here. Okay, we will see some examples where we have some more hardcore programs, and from there if you are able to evaluate statements. Okay. So I hope basic operations are clear to you. Because the purpose of showcasing you basic logical and or operator and the working of the same is like, if you take the bigger picture, we would be now moving on to conditional checks, where we will be checking whether a particular condition is returning true or not, and based on that we will be actually executing some actions. Okay, so let me just drill it down to you so that it makes more sense. So let me just add a different file over here. So just take it in this sense. I'm just trying to give you a real time example. Suppose you are working in a government organization where you need to, right, you check whether individual should have license. Okay, so this license is driving license. Okay, driving, purpose of driving. Okay, so what you will basically check is just the statement that we made before, right? You check whether he or she is more than 18. Okay, so he is 18 plus. Okay, you also check whether he is citizen. Check whether he is citizen, right? And there is no limitation on what all checks you have to do. Okay, so if you having a program, and if a new user is entering in the application, he provides his name, address, everything. So what would happen, so in your program you will check whether this condition is met, right? And if this condition is met, you will say yes, please proceed. Okay, and if the initial condition is also itself is not met, then there is no point of allowing your user to move on with that application where he wants to register to get a driving license, right? So then we would say that sorry, you are not eligible, end of application, right? So how do you make such statements in programming world is using conditional statements, right? So we talked about two contradicting statements, and if you want to check only based on the conditional of the statement, then we can use conditional statement. So for example, if the condition one, okay, just believe that this condition is whether we are checking that age is something what we're expecting it to be, right? If this condition is returning as true, right, we would be running this piece of code, run this, okay, or execute this. I would say execute some code here, proceed, correct? And if this condition is not returning anything, for example, if condition is returning as false, right, then we can say that you have to run this piece of code. Okay, so execute code mentioned here. Okay, so this way, whatever we have discussed so far, you can make it in a conditional way, so that that's how the program would be proceeding, right? So and this condition will be whatever expression that we are trying to mention, right? So for example, you can make use of the same thing that we had used in terms of age, right? And a vague example would be whenever we provide a statement. So if I just I will just, okay, so just example, you want to greet someone, right? So your application is needs to run in a very dynamic mode, okay? So if I see you in the morning, right, in my same time zone, and we are meeting in person, I would say hello, good morning, right? And if I meet you in the afternoon, I can say hello, good afternoon, right? And any time past the evening, I would be referring it as evening, right? So otherwise as evening, right? So what would happen? So if the time is between morning 6 to 12, so this would be my morning time, okay? And the same statement, let me just copy it down, okay? And if it is past 12, say 12 to somewhere around 3 or 2, I don't know how afternoon is defined in another time zones, okay? So I'm just assuming sometime after 12 p.m., okay, 12 p.m. to 4 p.m. something, okay? You can still greet them as afternoon, right? I believe after 4 p.m. it will be completely evening, but so anytime after 4 p.m., right? I would say after time after 4 p.m. can be defined as evening, right? And now just understand that if you have an application where you just want to greet a person, right? So what I can make the same, so I can write the same English statement that you see in say 18, 19, 20 in the terms of how programming can read the statement and provide conditions around it, right? So if I say if I just define a variable, say hour, like hour of the time, and the hour of the time is somewhere around 6 right now, okay? PM and EM you can ignore for now. I am just taking it as a statistical value, as a whole number value. And if I say if the hour that I say, right, the hour should be between 6 to 12, right? So the hour is greater than or equals to 6, okay? And what can be the other statement? And if it is less than 12, right? So till 12 we have that buffer, right? So
Still
if
or
you,
equal.
no, yeah, less than or equal, yeah, less than or equal is also fine. So till 12 we want to do that, right? So less than or equals, I can say that just print the output as console.log and just say what we can say, good morning. Okay, let me do one more thing, right? Instead of adding statement like this, if I want to also check what variable is getting passed, right? Let me make use of interpolation method itself, and let me just greet that person, hello, right? Good morning, just so that we understand. Okay, and let me also add the time over here so we understand what value is getting evaluated. Okay, so let me just add dollar symbol and also pass the variable value over here. Okay, so if the hour is between 6 to 12, we say good morning, right? And if it is outside 6 to 12, right, then what we need to do is we need to greet with some other statement, right? So if, and if you want to add one more statement, you can make use of else if, right? And inside else if we can provide another expression, so hour greater than 12, correct? And also between 4, right? So 4 p.m. is something that we mentioned, right? So and hour less than 4. Okay, we can have another statement. Okay, so this time it is afternoon, so let me just copy the same statement that I see over here, make a small change quickly, make it as afternoon, correct? And if it is not falling inside both the condition, anytime after 4 p.m. is evening, right? So I can simply have an else statement. So something that doesn't fall in statement 1 and 2 will be my statement 3. So I don't have to exclusively say else if saying anytime after 4 because I just have evaluated both the condition. So my last condition would be anything above 4 p.m. right? Should be mentioned over here. Console C missing. Okay. And let me copy this and let me change this to evening with hour. Okay, save this file. Okay, so what would happen in this case now? So if I just try to run this statement, okay, now you can see my hour is defined as 6, right? Now I have mentioned hour as 6. So which statement would now be working and what will be returned in our console output?
If statement, first if statement. Hello, good morning.
Okay, let us validate that by running the same statement, same program.
Hello, 6.
Okay, but what happened here, guys? Something went wrong. Condition is not defined is shown.
You have
Okay,
if
okay. My mistake, guys. I
yeah,
just added an expression over here.
comment.
I should have commented it out. Okay. Let me rerun this again. So what is happening? The first statement is running. So hello, good morning, and the time is also shown so that we know what variable value is getting added over here. Okay. So if I add any other statement, say 23, what would happen here? In this case, whether statement 1 will be executed in this case. So the hour is now mentioned as 23. Okay, and our conditional check is where we are checking whether the hour is greater than or equal to 6 and less than or equals to 12.
Good evening.
Yeah, that's right. Because something that is not falling in statement 1 and 2 will be considered as a default statement and that can be run. Okay, so similar examples you can check with respect to driving license that I told you, right? With age being valid and US citizen, right? So you can also put if conditions around the same and work around the same thing. Using
Cyril, how did you commented multiple lines at one time?
yeah, so you can simply copy the whole thing and you can press control / that is available to you. You see a question mark symbol that is available to you, you can make use of the same. So copy the
Okay,
whole statement and
got it.
press Control plus forward slash. Let me just add this for you if you haven't seen this. Okay, so Control plus forward slash. This is the first list. Okay. So I hope if statements are clearer to you, and I think we are almost at the end of the session. So I'm taking it very slow because if your fundamentals are very strong, then we can move forward as soon as possible. So that's why my emphasis is always focusing on fundamentals and making you used to the programs, right? So like today's session, I would also ask you guys to uh,
So Cyril, however, the value 4 actually above, you have given 6 and 4 actually. 4 p.m. we did not mention anywhere, or it should be
no,
24
PM I have not mentioned anywhere because I am not hardly checking anything. So you are saying that I should give 16 over here, right? In that case,
hours. Yeah,
24 hours per month. Yeah, that is up to you.
but 4 is less than 6, right? So how it will consider that value? We are not giving 24 hours format. Below, if we go a little bit,
Hmm.
somewhere you have given 4 value, no? Like 4
Yeah,
p.m.
this one, right?
Mm.
Yeah, you can change it to 16. Okay, I just gave you a vague example in how you can write multiple if statements, right? You can change it to 16 and then check it out. Okay, a basic example is to check different checkpoints. That's it. So this can be any other example. You can have your own example if you want to just try different if statements.
Okay.
Yeah. So coming to assignment, I would say that create an user eligible for license. Okay. I think this we have already discussed, but write the same thing in if and else conditions. Okay, and do complete this exercise. Okay, it's a very simple exercise. You just have to make use of if statements, right? And inside the if statement, provide that condition to check whether he is eligible for driving license. Okay, conditionals can be anything that you see. Okay, not only what I have mentioned, whether to check age or something else. If something else condition you want to check, you can even add that condition, and the output should be if all the conditions are met, then only the application should be providing a driving license to an user.
Like for the example, we did like when the age is above 18 and he is a citizen, that is
Ah,
when he has to get satisfy
yeah,
if condition. So
yeah.
can
The
we
same
use
thing you need
apply
to
one with
put.
and yeah.
Yeah, the
So it's the
same thing you
same,
need
right?
to.
We have to do
Yeah,
like
same
this.
thing, but you have to use using if statements
Yeah.
to
Okay.
complete the exercise. Yeah. So if you have any questions, do let me know. Tomorrow's session will be taking on loops. Basically, we have different loops that are available in all the programming languages, basically for loop, while loop, right? And we can have a combination of the same, right? After for loop, inside you can have a if conditional loop, right? And if the condition is satisfied, we can do so many things, and we can make the system as complicated as possible. So that's right. So do let me know if you have any questions. We are almost at the end of the session. Let me stop recording.